Graduate students come to the Boston area for education and higher skills, but they also need to build connections and even to change the experience of learning. That certainly applies to the Society of Black Doctoral Students, formed in partnership with Harvard University. To tell us about the group and its recent reception is one of the student leaders, a PhD candidate from Harvard, Jeraul Mackey. Thank you very much for being with us, Jeraul.
Thank you for having us.
Jeraul, you are studying in the field of education, and what prompted you to get this society formed?
So this goes back into 2016. Before coming to grad school, I was an executive recruiter within Boston, and I was having a drink with a few other professional colleagues in the city, and we were all getting our PhD. And we had this moment where we looked at each other and we went, how amazing that 3 men of color are getting a PhD. How can we support each other? And this conversation about support made us take a step back and ask the question, how often do doc students from other institutions come together to provide this level of support? So what we did is that we recruited some of our colleagues from the city, community leaders, as well as higher education administrators, and have a planning meeting to say, how do we create a space for doctoral students to find a community and a support that they need, and that led to our first reception, and we've been doing it ever since.
Well, I imagine other graduate students have forms of support they might even take for granted, but what's missing? What was missing before you got this society started?
So for me, when I think about this work, it really comes down to community. I think about community within 3 ways. That's community that you build on campus. And I would say at every institution, doc students of color tend to find that campus community. What we've been able to add to that, I think, is the 2 pieces that are sometimes missing, is that how do you build community across different campuses? So what's really been unique about us, and this starts with our planning team, is to bring together doctoral students from Boston University, from Harvard, from UMass Boston, from MIT, as far away as UMass Amherst, to build those cross-campus connections. And then the last piece of that, when I think about community, is doing this work within community. So you can imagine, Chris, that if you are a doctoral student, it can be a very challenging and isolating time. You're focused on your studies and your research question. And what we've tried to do is say, how do we connect you with organizations who could benefit from your research and from your expertise? And also as a doctoral student, to really remind you that the work that we do is only as important as the impact that we can have within communities. So how do we connect those students with organizations around the Boston area so that we can have a really strong collaboration and partnership?
Partnering with the community is sort of interesting. The community certainly gets something from that. What do you get from that as a student?
Yeah, so from a student, I can tell you personally, it's such a unique and refreshing experience to be in a room full of folks who in many ways look like me or may even share my background. We heard from a number of students that say, you know, I'm the only one in my department, and sometimes I may be the only one within my lab. And to be in a place where you can just let your hair down, if you will, have a nice, comfortable conversation, I think that in many ways that's refreshing. I heard one student say this, and it's really resonated with me as well, is that it creates a safe space where sometimes you don't even need words to explain just the feeling of what is it like to be in a doctoral program that can be very intense and challenging as a person of color.
Well, I imagine that there must be some things you could bring up, let's say at this reception to somebody, that you wouldn't feel comfortable talking about with other students at Harvard or an advisor. What comes to mind?
So a few stories come to mind. One is that for some students, they talk about this term of microaggression. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard that term, yes.
But what a microaggression is the subtle ways in which you may feel as though you are ignored or slighted within a workspace. It may be as simple as someone confusing you with the other person of color within your department. There's ways in which that you might talk yourself out of that and say, well, maybe it wasn't this, maybe it was something else. What these environments allow you to do is to be in people who, one, may have similar experiences, but can also help you navigate and understand, well, how do you move in those spaces? How do you bring it up with your advisor, with some of your colleagues, if that's appropriate? So we see that side of it, that's a safe space. The other piece of it is that for many of these students, you could be in your first year in your program and you are socializing with folks who may be in their 5th year or on their way in the job market, and they can actually give you tangible advice on here's how you can position yourself now to be competitive within the job search. So we see it in ways that are informal as well as ways that are formal.
I know you don't want this to sound like an aggregation of deficits, but this is an opportunity to get more assets from connecting with these students. Give me an example of how that can help you.
Yeah, so I tell this personal story that for my research, I'm working with two nonprofits within the Boston area. And the way in which my research project came about, as you can imagine, I study hiring processes, and it's hard to get your foot in the door. There was a person at the reception who I shared my research interest with, and they said, I have someone for you to talk to. This person, I reached out and I called them, and they then connected me to someone else, and that someone else ended up becoming one of my research sites. So it's that type of sort of cultural capital where rather than me having to pick up the phone and try to cold call to recruit organizations to my site, in these actual settings, I was able to identify someone who didn't know me from a hole in the wall, but understood my research and wanted to be helpful. So it's that type of network, it's that type of community, it's that type of ways in which we try to help each other that I think really is an asset to the work that we do.
Of course, you're also maybe in a way looking to change the landscape in higher education as a group.
Yeah.
How would you like to do that, whether it has to do with faculty or admissions or even tenure? What would you like to change?
Yeah, so I would say just at a high level, doctoral programs can be extremely difficult. For some programs, the folks who you start with in year one may not be the same who finish the program. So what we try to think about is that how can we provide the support to help you matriculate and graduate? I think that's important for a few reasons. No matter which institution you identify within the Commonwealth, they all tend to have an issue of not having enough faculty of color within their ranks. We tend to think about this as a pipeline issue, right? So institutions may say, boy, we want to hire more, but we just don't have them in a pipeline. And there's some people who would interrogate that argument. What we're trying to do is identify and support individuals so that they can get the PhD and that we can really increase the pipeline. So that's one piece of it, and thinking about what we can change. The other piece of it is that the work that we do is in partnership with universities. So the most recent reception was at Harvard University. We've also had them at Boston University as well as the UMass system. So we're also giving students an opportunity to socialize and network with academic deans, with higher education administrators who could then become part of their network when they're then on the job market. So bringing those two worlds together is an important piece for us in trying to change the face of higher education administration as well as faculty.
Face and chemistry. We should finally mention, Jeraul, if people want to find out more about the society, is there some way they can do that?
If they want to find out more, I'll give them my email address if I can. So they can reach out to me directly at, my last name is Mackey at fas.harvard.edu. They can send an email there. They can also follow me on social media. It's Jeraul is my Twitter handle. So that's a way if they want to reach out for more information. I also want to, if I can, Chris, just underscore that this has really been a collective effort among a number of people who have been part of helping us to get to this point. I want to, if I can, give a shout out to Crystal Williams, who is the Associate Provost of Diversity and Inclusion at Boston University. She's been tremendous. Amari Parrish Jeffries and Austin Ash, who are doctoral students at UMass Boston, as well as Matthias Carter, who is the president of New England Blacks in Philanthropy. I think that together we've really been able to do the important work and start some important conversations about how we change the landscape of higher education in the city.
Thank you very much for being with us. Jeraul Mackey from the Society of Black Doctoral Students.
Thank you.
We'll have more news in just a moment.